Ghani's short flight from Kabul to Kathmandu this morning, from the Karakoram Mountains to the Himalayas, is really emblematic of the long journey that he has taken from the Habibia school in Kabul in the 1950s, a school incidentally that India helped re-establish after the ouster of the Taliban in 2001, to Columbia University and the World Bank several decades later. He's home now, back in Kabul, hopefully for good. Certainly that's not all. President Ghani's colorful past includes his candidature to succeed Kofi Annan as Secretary General of the United Nations in 2006, as well as head the World Bank in 2007. Instead, he ran the Institute for State Effectiveness, which examines the relationships between citizens, the state, and market forces. Today, 13 years after the fall of the Taliban, President Ghani presides over a national unity government that is beset with several challenges. Despite the combined expenditure of over $1 trillion by the US and its NATO allies, Afghanistan's poverty rate, about 36%, has remained about the same that it was 13 years ago. In addition, as US troops return home, the British, the Canadians, and those from several other countries have already left. There is the drugs mafia, the real estate mafia, as well as several warlords to deal with. Not to mention an increasingly confident Taliban and perhaps even the Al-Qaeda. Once upon a time, not so long ago, Ashraf Ghani, the academic, wrote a book called Fixing Failed States. And yet, Afghanistan remains one of the most beautiful countries in the world, endowed with incredible natural beauty, as well as an immense wealth of natural resources. It has always stood at the crossroads of Asia, bridging north and south, east and west, with a rare dignity and aplomb you will find nowhere else in the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To speak of his country, Afghanistan, his region, South Asia, and the world, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to present to you the President of Afghanistan, Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai. Your Excellency, I would like to...
Good afternoon. Thank you for the very generous introductions, Maharashtra. It's a pleasure to be back in Kathmandu. It's a city I know well, and it's a country where I've had the pleasure of being many times. What I'd like to talk about is to frame the advantages of backwardness. In history, there are rare moments where agency, thought, ideas, strategy can overcome structure, space, geography, and the weight of the past. South Asia is a region where we are on the one hand blessed with the weight of very important ideas, noble ideas. But on the other hand, it's a region that 70 years after partition still has not overcome the sense of the past. If we are to have the opportunity and the imagination to grasp the openness of today, we must be willing to overcome the past. And requiring the past requires that we grasp openness, backwardness as a process, understand its underlying causes, and not just deal with replication, repetition, or planning, but a new sense of design, a new sense that we can reframe the problems. In this moment, in order to allow for conversation, I will not focus on Afghanistan, I'll focus in general. What does it mean to be backward? It's a condition when poverty and inequality could be solved, but aren't. Afghanistan is a backward country. 36% of our population lives below poverty that no human being could endure or should endure. Backwardness is violence. As I was preparing for this talk, my young children in Paktika were blown up in a soccer field. I had to go straight from writing to the military hospital where I received bodies of 18 children wounded in various ways, and one of whom died on the flight. That night, our trauma unit performed 33 operations. Every day in South Asia, we deal with one or another form of violence. Violence against women, violence against children, violence against the disabled. But the greatest violence is against the poor. Despite our phenomenal growth in this region, we are still home to the worst form of poverty imaginable. And that's not tolerable. South Asia is also the least economically integrated region on Earth. We trade more with every other region of the earth than with ourselves. But backwardness is also a global condition. Inequality now has become spatial. Where one is born largely is determined one's life chances. And within the countries, spatial differences, again, are a fundamental driver of inequality. And because of it, despite the demonstration that wealth creation is no limit, we persist on reproducing poverty and inequality on a global scale. And the fundamental contradiction of our global moment is that on the one hand, the last phase of globalization, because we have had three phases of globalization. Globalization 1.0, that was centered on colonialism. In Asia, roughly from 1850 to 1914. In Asia was forced into structural backwardness. Globalization 2.0 from 1918 to 2005, which was the heyday of liberal openness with the states retreating to the background. But during the second moment, Asia produced its middle classes. Now both China and India, thanks to their phenomenal growth, have changed for the first time since 1800 the balance of global inequality. Post-2008, we're dealing with a different world. Prior to 2008, the prevalent notion was that the market knew best. The head in hand could not be questioned. After 2008, we are finding a new balance between the market and the state. But more importantly than anything else, we are finding a new balance with citizens. In South Asia, in this regard, is a beacon of hope. All across South Asia, citizens' movements are changing history. The other side, however, is the state systems are under attack by violence and ideology. And the state systems or being judged by their weakest points, not by their strongest. And we in Afghanistan know all too well what it is like to become a subject of a series of confluences that daily deprive us of what is normal. Competitiveness index. You see on one column it says factor, productivity, then it's transition, then it's efficiency, then it's innovation. These are, they call them stages, but they're not stages because they exist simultaneously. What is the condition of all of South Asian states? Factor-driven production. Not a single state in South Asia or country in South Asia is at the level of efficiency or at the level of innovation. And this is where we both see our inheritance and yet the possibility. India's phenomenal growth has lifted all of South Asia and opened up the possibility. But in remains to get of either China to the type of strategies of China or that of Singapore. And here we come to the limitations of the space. You know, our region is such that you could have breakfast in Delhi, lunch in Lahore, dinner in Kabul, and be next day in Dushanbe or Tashkent, all by road. But can you imagine how many obstacles there are? How many border points you need to cross? How many papers you need to fill? How many farms you must contend? Say, take any direction of movement. Movement of people, movement of goods. They are all constrained. Where we have freedom, of course, is in movement of ideas. And that means all of us can watch Bollywood. But even in movement of ideas, the nature of linkages is not focused on fundamental debates. If you look at European integration, networks, political party networks that were cross-national and transatlantic networks were important to them. Here we still have incipient movement but not fundamental shift. Because of it, the key in the future lies in market integration and prosperity. There's an immense room for enhancing market integration. And here we need to come to two propositions. The market is underdeveloped. There is an enormous range of market instruments that can be put to work without embracing market fundamentals. Second, that the market is not just national, but regional. And third, that there is no contradiction between competing at the global stage and enhancing regional economic integration. The European Union trades much more since its formation within and with the rest of the world without facing this contradiction. But one of the most important parts of our disconnectivity is our infrastructure. Both in terms of its effectiveness, but also in terms of its construction. If you look into the construction industry in all of South Asian countries during the last 20 years, but particularly during the last 10, you find enormous fluctuations. The construction industry and poverty may look very far apart, but are actually the most important set of relationships that we can find. Because it's the effectiveness of the construction industry that changes space, geography, and turns it into a space of connectivity. And it's here that a series of choices are open. And now I want to speak from the position of a country that is between and betwixt. Afghanistan is South Asian, Central Asian, small border with China, which makes us connected to East Asia, and of course, Middle East region. What is the choice? Energy is the driver, and South Asia is the largest deficit. There's 600 trillion cubic meters of gas in the Caspian. It's the largest supply of gas anywhere in the world. The smallest amount of trade between South Asia as a region is now with Central Asia. And this is the historic choice. Will South Asia, as its history of 10th to 19th century and earlier shows, connect to Central Asia through networks of energy, gas, oil, or will South Asia be forced to reintegrate with Southeast Asia and with use of old carbon fossil fuels? South Asia, Central Asia, today is a moment where it's awaiting connectivity. But when you look at Europe's energy plans, where do they focus? Central Asia. If you look at East Asia's focus, where do they focus? Central Asia. If you focus on Russia's energy systems, where do they focus? From South Asia, we've been dreaming, but not acting. And it is this historical opportunity that would turn a place like Afghanistan, that from every perspective has been marginal in the last 100 years, into a central space. We need a different way of proceeding, a different way of looking at things in order to make a difference. And that means, first of all, that we cannot do development in the usual manner. Project by project, small endeavor by small endeavor. If we want to realize this moment, then we need to think about region-wide projects. We need to mobilize financial resources very differently. We need to mobilize human resources differently. All of the possibilities exist. What is critical is an approach that can stitch the existing elements into a system. I hope that we have this possibility and that we would be able to move from type of politics and type of ideas that were based on command and control to collaboration and communication. Sadi, one of our poets, said, "Deep in the sea are riches beyond compare, but if you seek safety, it is on the shore." I lead a landlocked nation, but Afghanistan will be finding its future in that sea. Thank you.
I'll ask you a couple of questions and then we'll open the session to the House. Thank you for your very thoughtful address about transforming the bloodied history of the region, if you like, and looking at the future, not project by project, but region by region. And you talked about having, breakfast in Delhi, lunch in Lahore, tea in Kabul, and dinner in Dushanbe. That's a new one, because we end our journey in Kabul very often. But I also would like to say that this morning we talked about the metaphor of the Grand Trunk Road, that was built by an Indian of Afghan origin, by Sher Shah Suri. But can I ask you why why is it that this connectivity and these dreams that leaders like yourself have been talking about for so many years, nothing has happened? Do you lack the political will to do this? Yeah.
What is political will? Political will is not some genius commanding down. Political will comes from a consensus. What we have lacked in South Asia is people-to-people consensus. That's the first thing. Because we've built, since 47, our histories in opposition, rather than unity. Second, political will comes from elite consensus, networks. The group that should drive economic integration seeks protection. Because as long as you're in factor-based economic productivity, you need uncle's government. The big license structure, not an open economy. Once you embrace competition in a real way, then your resistance breaks.
So you're saying that the elite is keeping the peoples of South Asia apart?
The elite has kept the people of South Asia.
So leaders like yourself?
Yes, and that's precisely why we need to take backwardness, again, as I articulated, is when we know better, but we do otherwise.
So are you going to tell the leaders, the prime ministers and the presidents that you meet over the next couple of days here in Kathmandu, that it's leaders like yourselves that have kept all of us apart?
Yes.
Can I ask you, Mr. President, you talk about, you're very frank about this, but the fact is that it's peoples like us who suffer these sort of animosities that elites have.
But it's not that simple. Part of it is that we require several fundamental changes in culture. First, the culture of the state. The culture of the state and the culture of the people is often confused. We are in the middle of changes in the inherited hierarchical cultures of the state. And this is gradual, but I think a systematic change. Second, we require elite institutions such as yourself. So please don't put yourself on the other side. You're no longer in the category of the ultra poor. You're part of the very privileged.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. No, but the cultural elite needs to articulate an agenda that is really based on communication and cooperation. Our medias have been as responsible for our separations as have been other components of the elite. So I hope that also requires attention. But the third element is our universities, our top leaders. The level of connectivity. When I find South Asians, for instance, when I was teaching in Johns Hopkins or at Berkeley, we all congregated regardless of the World Bank. We had immense friendship.
All the South Asians congregate?
All the South Asians. But when we go and lead our institutions, then it's our national. And this is the last thing. The inherited sense of state structures from Europe of 16th century is my nation right abroad. Mm-hmm. Now we need to understand that the nation-state system, the state system, is under threat. And we can only avoid the threat by cooperation.
Okay, so we no longer really need to fly the flag that we've been flying for so many decades. But I'd like to ask you to sort of help you move away, if you like, to your own country. South Asia, we talked about how this troubled neighborhood that we live in. But you live in an exceptionally troubled country. The American troops are going to leave sooner than later, and your own security forces are going to take charge. Are you nervous?
No. I led the security transition for 3 years. I've been to every province of Afghanistan 3 to 10 times. I've been to every garrison, every corps command. I know every single general in the Afghan army, police, and security forces. Look, we have pictures. I want to exaggerate the point. Entering Afghanistan is very easy. Getting out of it is another proposition if people come in thousands.
But are you saying that you don't need the American troops, you don't want them to stay?
Look, it's two different things. The American troops were needed in a particular moment in history. That moment is past. They're leaving on December 31st, 2014, as agreed. But they're staying to help us train, equip, and finance. In 2001, when I went back, after 24 years, the land was parched. There was no chair in the Ministry of Finance. 90% of the Ministry of Finance didn't have chairs when I took over in June of 2002. We are a different country with a lot of capabilities. Our strengths should be understood. People focus on our weaknesses. I see our strengths. And the other is, we have national will.
But is this national will, forgive me for interrupting you, Mr. President, is this national will enough to combat a resurgent Taliban?
Of course it is.
It is?
It is, because why did I win the presidency? You think if people women who had not gotten into their houses for 30 years were urged by mullahs to come and vote. Mosque by mosque, yes? Our backwardness economically is in radical contrast to our ideas of participation in citizenship. Our advantage is precisely that we don't have an entrenched union. So our citizens are engaged.
So the people of Afghanistan will come out and fight the Taliban and perhaps the Al-Qaeda and perhaps the Haqqani network and perhaps several other terror groups that sow mayhem in Afghanistan and across other parts of South Asia.
The people already will. We need to make sure that we deliver on good governance, on rule of law, and on empowerment. 38% of the voters were women. That's a remarkable fact when you see that Afghanistan was subject to gender apartheid, to get 38% of the electorate being women. So, yes, we have enormous challenges.
So you're not afraid of being on your own?
No, we've been on our own for 5,000 years, for God's sake. What's 5,000 more?
But on the other hand, Mr. President, your first trip, of course, you went to perform the Umrah, but after that your first trip was to China and then to Pakistan only less than 10 days ago. You know India well, you said to me earlier. But the fact is that you have all these other countries in your neighborhood, just the three countries I mentioned, Pakistan and India and China, who want to expand their sphere of influence in your country. Are you afraid that there will be another proxy war or several proxy wars inside Afghanistan?
Nobody is going to be able to expand their sphere of influence. Everybody is welcome to cooperate. We provide the platform of cooperation.
Okay.
Look, 19th century ideas, please put Lord Curzon aside and invoke Mahatma Gandhi in Nehru. There are two different visions. The vision of sphere of influence is product of Lord Curzon. An imposed geography, and he did not succeed. We beat the hell out of him. But the vision that the great thinkers of independence taught to needs to be realized. The struggle for freedom in South Asia provided new forms of politics. And we need to re-embrace those. Afghanistan is a point of intersection. We want to become the Asian roundabout. For thousands of years, we were the Asian roundabout. Every conceivable idea in antiquity to the 18th century came to us in wet fields.
So you're not worried that India and Pakistan, for example, none other than Pakistan's former president Pervez Musharraf has just said very recently that you're shutting your eyes, Mr. President, you're not.
No, Mr. Musharraf is an activism who has no relevance.
Okay. That sounds good to an Indian audience, but
I mean, isn't it relevance?
the question is that India and Pakistan, you're not concerned, or are you not overly concerned?
So, my job as leader of Afghanistan is to make sure we all cooperate. If I give to fears, my people will suffer. They did not elect me to be afraid. They know that I'll sacrifice.
And what about China? What does China want?
China wants cooperation. China is opening up its growth to its neighbor. And I had the privilege of working 5 years each, not simultaneous, 2 years, 5 years, in South Asia, in East Asia, and then on Russia. China's rebirth is one of the most remarkable acts of comeback in history. And now it's in a new phase. And that phase means that its future needs to connect. Because China is not factor-driven. It is efficiency. And the next issue for China is to think through long-term. China has shown the capability to master the future.
Well, that's a new beginning, certainly, but I'd like to open this to the House. If anybody would like to ask a question, please raise your hands. Guest and
Excellency, my name is Farooq Subhan. I'm from Bangladesh, and it's a great pleasure and privilege to listen to you. I have personally been a great believer in regional economic integration, and I fully endorse everything you said. Focusing on one particular project which I think can change the face of the region and Afghanistan. That's
the ideas of regional. It's people like you who change attitudes. And so I urge all business councils to sort of focus on these larger. TAPI is indeed a transformative project. We've had very good discussions. I've had discussions on the phone with the president of Turkmenistan and then in China with the foreign minister, and I'll be going shortly. We need to push this because the diversification.
Right. I live this every day.
you do live it every day.
Every day, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to work, till the moment I go to bed.
What is it that you face?
Like, to sum it up, basically what I face in a subjective point of view is that people are aware of all this. People want to, like it has already been mentioned, also men are coming up in Nepal to, fight for issues like this and put women forward in so many aspects. But the awareness is there to divide it and view it from the micro perspective. The awareness is there, but people they kind of fail to execute it and implement it.
So you feel subjectified, you feel commodified, you feel that you're being looked at as an object rather than as a woman.
Yeah, and I face that every day. And like I said, we are the issues here. It's not just an issue, it is the life I've been leading for so long. Being in a South Asian country, I was brought up in Germany and coming back here and living here and working here, I face this every day. But then having said that, it's also amazing how people at times go out of their way to modify these things. For instance, I recently conquered Mount Everest. I was on the top of the world. And
you climbed Mount Everest?
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
how many of you have climbed Mount Everest? Not one person in this audience. That's great, Michelle.
See the difference, right? While we are in the mountains, in from camp 1 to camp 4, I was supposed to share a tent with a Sherpa. He was my guide, he was my God, he was supposed to see if we were supposed to look after each other. And sharing a tent in a regular life basis would mean taboo. My parents would be like, hey, wow, and suddenly I come from the mountains and it's okay to adjust to the fact that basic survival instincts kick in and it's okay to actually spend nights with one Sherpa guide, and it is regarded as sort of, still pure and acceptable. And things like that. So it's amazing how
when you come down to the plains, when you come down to Kathmandu Valley,
Yeah.
what did people say? Did they?
I just wanted to go back to the mountains, like seriously, because it is amazing how Mother Nature never looks upon me as a woman and looks at me and says, hey, there's going to be a blizzard, but since you're a woman, I'll grant you your life or whatever,
She takes special care of you.
Exactly, she does not. I mean, either you live or you die, and being in the vast, raw lap of Mother Nature, it's a very simple lesson that I derive from it, that, gender bias, it's really sad that we actually have to face this.
Right. I'm going to open this discussion to the house, to the audience. If anybody would like to ask a question, I just want to say one thing. 2 years ago in New Delhi, this is in December 2012, we had this horrifying, absolutely horrifying incident in which this young girl was very, very brutally raped. I'm talking about the Nirbhaya incident. And I'm just wondering, it had a huge impact. Ms. Meenakshi Lekhi talked about this recently. Just one way attitudes inside Delhi, if not in other parts of India. But I'm just wondering, did this have an effect, an echo in Nepal, for example, or in other parts of South Asia? Would anybody like to talk about that? Yeah, go ahead. Apart from sexual violence, there's, dowry deaths, all kinds of other violence. Do you think that we are becoming more sensitive, or do you think we're becoming more callous?
I think we are becoming more sensitive because if you look, this is for me, and for all of us. I think this is not Southeast Asia. This is South Asia. I think this is just Kathmandu. We have to go outside Kathmandu and think about what happens there and how equal we are there. Talking about just 15 kilometers from here, people are still, there is discrimination on education.
Discrimination?
On education, okay? The government says we have free access to education in the government school, not in the public school. But girls are not allowed. That, I'm going back to your question because you're talking about, so girls, if there are 5 children, 2 are girls and 3 are boys, the parents would rather educate the boys, and not the girls, because the girls would get married and go. So still, we are behind. The sensitization has not been so much, people have not been aware of things outside the valley or outside the capital. So there has to be more sensitization on education, on equal rights, and I've already told you about kinship, which is right here. And I think all the issues regarding and like dowry, we Nepalis, we say
trafficking,
yeah,
trafficking.
I would also go to that. Because of no access to education, no access to job opportunities, the girls are being lured by the traffickers for trafficking. Yeah, and for example, we are saying we say that we don't do dowry in Nepal, but there is dowry existing. Because when the trafficker comes, he never says, I will take your child and make her a prostitute. He says, your child is getting big, she needs money to get married. So that is how he lures and takes. So that means the girl needs money, so all of us need money to get married. There is dowry in a little portion or a big portion. So I think until and unless this kind of debate goes on, and if you do not fight for the equal rights of the girls, then and the policy makers, if they don't think about the gender issues, then I think we will still have to fight for another 50 years.
Please.
When we talk about the gender equality issue, I think there is remaining dialogue. There are many untold stories. Yes, South Asia as a whole we have achieved so far.
On gender issue, be appointed immediately. The second would be on all the forums, whether it's economic cooperation, energy, terrorism, counter-terrorism. I think women should represent on each forum because women are not there just to discuss gender issues. So you have to genderize the largest minority in every setup, and not just the developing nations as SAARC nations, but across the globe. And that biggest minority in the world is excluded. It is an exclusionary process by which you give them a corner that please talk on gender issues and get excluded from everything else. So I think it is this exclusion which needs to be targeted, because women have shown their prowess in even military, which is more masculine than any other job in the world, and one had to fight, and I was there for that particular matter where permanent commission to women officers in the army was being denied. And then the court came through and court took a very strong case against the military. So I think that's how you can break the stereotype. Yes. And two immediate suggestions.
Typically, frankly speaking, I don't think putting women necessarily, or taking gender, mainstreaming gender issues has typically, because I agree. I think a lot of money, external money, is also spent on fancy conferences on gender equality, etc., which leads to not, to be quite honest. It's a great platform for people to get freebies in terms of all sorts of interesting things. But really, I believe that if you want to really empower, and again, I think we're all agreeing with President Ghani a bit too much, more than I would like, but the Pakistan People's Party, for instance, when it came into power, decided to empower women through two forms. One, through legislation, because typically in sophisticated societies, and none of the South Asian countries currently represents sophisticated societies where the society itself protects women, as it does in the Scandinavian or many other developed countries. You need strong legislation. So for instance, in Pakistan, you needed legislation against acid attacks, because it was a norm in Pakistan, and you wanted men to know, and any attacker to know, that if you were to do it, you could potentially face 5 years.
What about the blasphemy law? I know you're saying that.
Again, blasphemy law is something which requires possibly legislative changes, but more than that, it's a cultural norm of blasphemy law and how it is applied, which is problematic.
But the state has not been able to deal with that.
No, the state found it very difficult because of the very, it's a very sensitive topic, right? And many typical governments, it's like the issue of sati, for instance, in India, right? Now, sati in some ways objectifies women in a way that is objectionable to the highest order, right? Because you're basically saying that if your man has died, that you, now it doesn't mean...
But sati is unlawful. Sati
exactly.
is a violation of the law.
Sati is absolutely unlawful.
But unlike the blasphemy.
Yes.
But anyway, I mean, I'm not getting into an argument about
exactly.
that. But
so what I'm saying is that there are many laws, there are many cultural norms which are inherited from the culture that we were part of, rather than the religion that we're part of. Now on blasphemy, I think by and large, not only the liberal population, but many people in Pakistan have serious problems with how it is implemented and possibly require for it to be changed. But the route to change that is something that we need to obviously figure out to the best. So what I was going to say eventually was that women, the economic empowerment of women is really the road to go. Okay, because when you economically empower a woman in societies like ours, you're giving them a say in that family. You're giving them a say on their own future. And we, for instance, 1/4 of the development spending, about 70 billion rupees, we decided to spend on what we call the Basic Income Support Program, where all households which were below a certain income average, the women of those households, not the men, the women on their identity cards were being given a certain money from the state. We found it to be a very effective way of bringing, the status of women within those households up.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. Answer it at this forum whether you should be a house husband or somebody else should be a housewife. But I just want to come back to you, Anuradha ji, and I just wanted to ask you, is that do you think that we are doing enough, all of us, men, women, we want to break down these gender stereotypes. Do you think that we are doing enough across the region?
I honestly to tell, we have heard prominent leaders, we've been hearing everyone for a very long period. Our country has faced many turmoils, but still there is a lot of things to be done. I cannot repeat again and again, just simple thing like job opportunities, education, equal access, citizenship. We are not given that opportunities. So how can you say there has been done, enough thing has been done? Enough thing has not been done. We all have to, I think someone said just now, what would you say in Saru said, what would they take to the Shah? For me, I would advise that women's issue should be discussed. And I know, again, women will be left behind in this Shah also.
In this Shah, yeah. Nisha, I'm going to give you a comment and commit to two things based on the history. One is that my party is committed to the cause of women, and Mr. Modi, as a CM earlier and now the Prime Minister, is definitely committed to the cause of women. 3 incidents I'll tell you. One is that in 2010, it was his government which passed a bill in Legislative Assembly giving women 33% reservation, which was sent to the centre because every bill to become an act you need presidential assent. It was sent to the centre and the then president till later presidents never signed that bill. So it was not my party and it was not my chief minister or now the prime minister who's responsible, 1. 2, my party has given 33% reservation to women within the party structure. Now when you give women reservation within the party structure, which is very much within the hierarchy of the party, you are actually generating women leaders, because a leader is not produced out of the air. A leader gets to be trained at the work in hand. You need media management, financial management, policy management to the strength of organization. And if you get trained at that by working within the party structure, you are there not because you are contesting, as Mr. Bani just now said, I can quote my example. I'm not here because I contested against another woman. I contested against 2 men and a sitting minister. So the real women of substance will come forward if you train them in the right perspective by training them within the political system and the party system. Now coming to the third part where you wanted to tie me down to 33% reservation, I am personally, I debated this earlier, that the reservation not necessarily 33% seats be given to women, but I am of the opinion that 33% tickets be given to women. Because no party would ever want to lose 33% seats. So only women of substance would be able to contest. It cannot be you're related to so and so, so instead of father, the daughter contest, instead of the husband, wife contest. I actually want women who are trained at political messaging to come forward, and that is possible when there is a mandate of the law that 33% tickets be given to women, otherwise you'll be de-recognized as a party. That's a great suggestion. Nalini, do you have a question?
The 30%, you should be half and half or more than that.
I agree with you.
We say we are women.
The studies from Norwegian and Scandinavian countries. Because
no, but why are we looking at Norwegian?
Let me just complete my technical argument. It is based on statistics. If you give tickets to 33%, finally the women who reach the parliament is close to 50%. Because some who have contested earlier as women are leaders in their own right, there will be some who will be contesting on general seats, and there will be 33% in any case. So finally to the parliament there will be women who are more than 33%.
Okay.
So which is a
you're not answering Anuradha ji's question.
No, I'm answering her. I'm saying
She's not satisfied. She's saying yes.
because she needs to study the study I'm talking
No,
about.
that's fine. But I think her point is that which exists in Parliament today, it's only for 33% reservation. What about Pakistan? Are you satisfied with 75 seats, if I'm not wrong, that are given to women?
This quota which is reserved for women, which means that 33% women will be in Parliament, as nominated by the political parties, and then there will be more women, as in the case of Pakistan, for instance. In my times, I remember both times in Parliament, there were 12 women who contested the general elections that came. So, we can agree on 50%, 60%, 70%, 30%. I think 33% was a very good start. So you have to start, you have to have a starting point. And then there's obviously the mainstreaming. I also believe in mainstreaming of, women in the general, processes, whether it's economic or political or social.
I think again I would say, why quota system? Why quota system? I don't understand that. I would like to get explanation. Why quota system for women? Why not quota system for men?
Absolutely, I think that's a fair question. Nandini, would you like to answer? But that's a separate discussion. Disha, you will have the...
To imagine a perfectly balanced world, that would be heaven. I would like to call it heaven, be it on a personal level, on a family level, or a societal level. But then, yes, I've been speaking on behalf of women, saying, doing things for the sake of positive discrimination, which actually, as a human being, I go through conflicts every day, even doing that. But then discriminations, we can take it to that point, being a Nepali youth, I'm saying this, where no one should be harmed via discrimination, like women violence. She talked about dowries and women being burnt because they didn't bring enough money to the in-laws and all. What actually puts me back is, like, I've traveled extensively throughout Nepal while shooting, and people are improving, changing, not just women, but men are coming out. They want, from a very small example, they take their women to, when she's giving birth to a child, they make it a point to be there. That's there, like, it's improving, it's coming up slowly. But what really puts me back is how the statements in laws, like new laws are being formed and they're being passed, but not executed. And for that, I think we need the 33% of women for there to execute the laws. I had this discussion with my dad, and I was like, very adamant. Why just like she said? And my dad told me that 33% face the reality. We live in a South Asian country, and no matter what you do, where you go, you'll be facing it. Like I said, it's my daily life, right? But then look at that 33% to be the added number of percentage in the future. Do whatever you can from your side.
But I think let's dream like Anuradha ji. We shouldn't have any quotas, no barriers.
I totally agree to that. I wish, like I said, a perfectly balanced world is for me like heaven. It would be heavenly for us.
On this note, ladies and gentlemen, a big hand to Nisha Adhikari and Anuradha.
In 2006, all SAARC nations ratified the SAFTA, the South Asia Free Trade Agreement. But since then, we haven't been able to make any progress towards a meaningful economic integration. Is that the way things will stay? Or is it possible to have a South Asian region on the lines of the European Union? Not politically, but at least economically. Let me introduce you to a very high-powered panel this evening, starting with Vinod Chaudhary, chairman of the CG Chaudhary Group in Nepal, one of Nepal's foremost industrialists. Also with us today is Farooq Shoban, president of the Bangladesh Enterprise Institute, a leading think tank in Bangladesh. Zubair Ahmad Malik is the managing partner of Guys and Dolls, and he's the immediate past president of the Federation of Pakistan Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Welcome, sir. Darshu Dorji is the chairman of the Singye Group of Companies in Bhutan. He's also a past president of the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Vikram Jeet Singh Soni. He's the corporate president of the Sun Group. Once again, a past president of the SAARC Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And we're putting this program together in association with our partners, the Confederation of Indian Industry. So let me start by getting Vinod Chaudhary to explain what holds back, in your view, true South Asian economic integration. In 2004, experts agreed that there must be a SAFTA. 2006, it was ratified, but we haven't been able to move towards meaningful economic integration. What holds it back, given the problems, especially between India and Pakistan? Mr. Chaudhary, do you believe we can have a South Asian region like the European Union?
Thank you, Rahul. Let me start by sharing my thoughts on why EU and SARC, there are distinctly different reasons why they can't even be compared. EU essentially came into being because of their desire to put together an economic union, starting with coal and steel, and later on which graduated to becoming the customs union. Whereas, if you look at the genesis of the process of the formation of SARC, it was by and large the smaller countries of the region, years of engagements in one form or other, bilaterally, multilaterally, regionally. The problems I find between India and Pakistan getting deeper and more complicated, because they are all related with the internal issues more so than the regional behavior. As a consequence, we believe, and when I say we, meaning I like to associate myself with countries like Bangladesh and Sri Lanka and Maldives, that we've been unnecessarily kept as hostage. We should, I think the leadership, Mr. Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who has demonstrated a different kind of a willingness, a different strategy, which one has not seen since the I.K. Gujral era, of engaging with the South Asian countries on a more open and a more liberal basis, and someone who understands the value of business and economic integration, someone who had the courage and imagination to build a vibrant Gujarat, and same time Nawaz Sharif, who himself comes from a business background, who's pushed huge economic reforms in Pakistan last time he was the Prime Minister. I think these two leaders should agree to disagree and agree to release the other countries to work together. I once again like to go back to my point that sub-regionalism is the only way forward. The countries which has better proximity in the region, better synergies in the region. For instance, Nepal is not connected with any other South Asian region. We are only connected with India. To go to Lahore to export to Lahore, I have to go through Dubai or through Calcutta. Forget about Sri Lanka or Maldives or Pakistan. So these are ground realities. So I believe that, if you try to put together something which doesn't fit, doesn't gel, we will go on making this experiment for another 30 years to come.
You're calling for sub-regional economic cooperation. You're saying that there are political disputes between India and Pakistan that hold the entire concept of SAFTA hostage. And that's very interesting. I want to put that question to Zubair Ahmed, because Pakistan agreed, India gave the MFN status, the most favored nation status, to Pakistan way back in 1996. Pakistan hasn't yet reciprocated. In September 2012, Pakistan once again said that it will move towards a most favored nation status, but because it translates to Sabse Pasandida Mulk, that's politically unacceptable in Pakistan, and therefore there's been no forward movement. So the suggestion that Mr. Chaudhary makes is, leave Pakistan outside, let there be sub-regional cooperation between India and Nepal, India and Bangladesh, India and Sri Lanka. That's the way forward. Would you agree, sir?
Sorry, I didn't necessarily
say
Pakistan out.
I realize, but I'm asking you this question. Absolutely.
India out.
Absolutely. I'll ask you, Mr. Sawhney, the other question.
Even if Mr. Chaudhary has said so, I tend to disagree. He said, he used the word, does not gel. Sorry. Pakistan was formed in 1947, but before that, there is a history of 1,000 years gelling together. So that question of does not gel in does not arise. Yes, I agree with you. We have had a very checkered history politically Sometimes it was the army, sometimes it was democracy, and then again the democracy was not allowed to function properly. They gave them half a chance and the governments were dismissed and again taken over. That's there. And that in a way created some problem for the political.
Do you believe in the idea of SAFTA? Do you believe it's feasible?
Yes, it is feasible. It's very much feasible. And the recent development, especially in 2012, they bear testimony to it. When we moved from positive to a negative list.
But only notionally. As far as the most favored, you've changed the nomenclature to non-discriminatory market access.
I addressed that question of the most favored nation. I said it in India about 2 weeks back when you had the economic summit, that India should immediately be given the most favored nation. I said it as a president of the federation as well. And it was in that context when we had a FARC business leaders conclave under the patronage of Mr. Vikram Sahani sir, who was president of FARC at that time. I think all the 8 commerce ministers gathered in India, and from then the progress started moving. The trade has dramatically increased between the 2 countries. It's now hovering much below the potential. Now, the official trade between India and Pakistan is about $2.6 billion. But let me tell you, there is trade which is also taking place through a third country, that is Dubai. I know 3 steel mills, steel re-rolling mills are being set up by India, but that does not account for in the official trade. They are being done through Dubai. Most favored nation status was agreed in 2012. It was also passed by the cabinet, and that's a documented fact. Yes, it's not been announced. And perhaps, I'm sitting on the media today, media had a very big role in that. They came up with very illogical arguments that MFN does not meet the most favorite or the most favorite. It's the most favorite. It's the interpretation, and then I think the government of Pakistan and India, they agreed on
non-discriminatory
market access terminology. As a matter of fact, I think by signing GATT agreement by Pakistan, the basic concept of WTO was that each country will give the most favored nation status to the other. There are no 2 opinions about it. I again urge from this platform to the Pakistan government that they should, because this is, let me tell you, this is being politically exploited as well, the terminology MFN. Prior to India giving MFN status to Pakistan, the balance of trade was in favor of Pakistan. But the day we got this status, MFN, the balance of trade shifted into India's favor, and I said that earlier the government of Pakistan does it. Let's see the reversal. Presently, your exports to Pakistan, they are about $2.1 billion, and Pakistan exports to India are only moving at about $500 million. So, again coming to this, I think at people-to-people level, between India and Pakistan, and I agree with them, it is the main hurdle in the development of FARC are the 2 countries, India and Pakistan. They are holding the other 6 countries hostage. I said it yesterday at another platform, I'm repeating it today. And now that the both head of governments, you have a new Prime Minister, and I think Mr. Nawaz Sharif also made last year. I think they should sit and they should resolve this issue once and for all. Not for the sake of 2 countries, but for the sake of their own people. 40% of the people in your country and my country are living below the poverty line. We owe it to them, and we owe it to our future generation as well.
Mr. Sani, it is true that India and Pakistan have held back
SAFTA and any real form of cooperation. But the reality also is that the idea of SAFTA requires market integration between the South Asian neighborhood. We haven't been able to achieve market integration in India. Goods and services tax not even a reality. It may become soon, but it isn't so far a reality. Is the idea of SAFTA then stillborn when there's hardly any market integration amongst our states, let alone between countries and integrating their economies?
As regards SAFTA, we all know that the intra-SAARC trade, intra-SAARC regional trade has been very low to about 6%. But why SAFTA has not been fully implemented? Of course, as earlier been said, a lot of bilateral issues between various countries held hostage. But I must clarify that as far as India is concerned, India have already allowed a zero duty import access to all the least developed countries in SAARC, except maybe a few items like liquor and tobacco. All imports from the least developed countries from SAARC can be made to India at zero duty. But the main reason for the regional economic integration not following the EU model is also the basic drawback is the connectivity. It starts with the movement of people. First people have to move, then goods will move. Although through SAARC chamber we have been able to get say 500 visas, but what is 500 SAARC visa exemption stickers? Can't be possible for the governments to identify few thousand bona fide businessmen, few thousand bona fide journalists, few thousand bona fide sportsmen, few thousand intellectuals, who can be given a South Asian visa exemption sticker. Currently, it was possible through our efforts to get 500 SAARC visa exemption stickers for the bona fide businessmen of the SAARC countries. We welcome this beginning, but why 500? Why means there should not be any difficulty to identify more people, because people should move, and to encourage our tourism industry we must have a South Asian tourist permit or some kind of thing. So this is connectivity of airlines, people, mobile connectivity. Having said that, to answer your question again, why SAFTA and the trade and economic integration has not been there? Because we don't have reciprocal banks and financial institutions in each other countries. The transaction time between conducting a trade between two SAARC nations is maybe 10 times what if we import and export with Europe or US or any other region or South or the BRICS nation. So first is the financial connectivity. We must have the reciprocal bank branches, and we have also demanded that the trade in SAARC should be conducted in South Asian regional currency. Why we have to peg our currencies to euro and dollars and pay forward premiums? So why can't trade be conducted in South Asian clearing unit, reciprocal bank branches, and we have also demanded establishment of South Asian Development Bank. If there can be a BRICS bank, why can't we have a South Asian or a SAARC Development Bank which will fund the infrastructure projects? Now we are talking about the power projects, because nature has endowed the SAARC region with vast hydropower between Bhutan, Nepal and India. Why can't we have a multilateral joint ventures in power on a PPP model where private investors are ready to put in? But we should have an institutional framework, a conducive framework to facilitate that. So I think these type of measures are very important, but the foremost of that is early conclusion of multimodal transport. Like Mr. Chaudhary was saying, and Mr. Malik was saying, if we have to export from, say, Bangladesh to Nepal or Afghanistan to India, we don't have a multimodal transport, a road transport, a shipping multimodal transport for intra-SAARC trade, and we hope that during this SAARC summit, at least these basic agreements will be concluded to pave way for regional integration, which is we are a long way to go, as from the EU model, because that is one custom union. Another thing is we don't have harmonization of, codes. We have done some work on NTBs. We tried last year to make many committees to have harmonization of, standards of all the commodities and services. But we are still a long way to go. But EU is the perfect example of one custom union, one visa. So I think all these points, starting from SAARC visa to financial institutions, to multimodal transport, to reciprocal bank, South Asian Development Bank, and another thing is industrial corridors, because we have taken up with the Prime Minister of India that when he has announced the Amritsar-Calcutta corridor, why can't we have Afghanistan, Lahore, Amritsar, Calcutta, Dhaka corridor, then the whole region can be integrated. So we have to think out of box, and SAARC with peace and prosperity as our slogan must move on.
Farooq Shoban, Binod Chaudhary has an interesting idea. He says that if you look for utopia, you'll have to wait for eternity. Instead, focus on sub-regionalism. This whole business of SAFTA as a free trade area will probably never come out because of political differences. And you were sitting in the audience in the morning and you saw how strong and stark the differences between the leaders of India and Pakistan were. Is that really the way forward? Improving ties between West Bengal, Bangladesh, India, Bangladesh, as opposed to trying to bring the entire South Asian region on board. Is it worth waiting for a situation where we can move towards an EU-style union, or is that impossible?
Rahul, let me begin with a little bit of history. In November 1979, that's exactly 35 years ago, I wrote the concept paper for SAARC. We then sent special envoys to the other 6 countries. We got strong support from 4. Interestingly enough, way back, and this was, I'm talking about 1980, 2 countries opposed the idea of South. One was India, because India thought this was a move for the smaller countries in the region to gang up against India. And Pakistan opposed it because they thought India would dominate this organization. And here we are 35 years later, still trapped, if you like, in the India-Pakistan divide. Now, what is the way out of this? And I think, we heard the president of Afghanistan today. The key to the success of the European community and later the European Union was the coal and steel agreement. What is it going to be in the case of South Asia? And the answer stares us in the face. It's energy cooperation. If we can operationalize TAPI, which I think is eminently doable, you then have a project which links Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, incidentally, has applied to also join this pipeline. We now have a number of hydroelectric projects which, following Mr. Modi's visit to Nepal, India, through the Economic Framework Agreement, has opened the way for energy cooperation between Nepal, India, Bangladesh, between Bhutan, India, Bangladesh. We have
Mr. Shoban, let me ask you a question.
No, let me just finish this.
Yes.
So what we need now really is 1 or 2 success stories. I think I endorse whatever Mr. Soni has said. We see enormous opportunities, not so much coming out of trade, but removing the barriers to trade which will facilitate investment. If you look at the Sri Lankan India free trade agreement, the success story of that has been Indian investments in Sri Lanka. Similarly, the opportunity I see, for example, in the Bangladesh-India trade agreement, which allows us duty-free access, is Indian investments. You then have Indian companies come investing in the smaller countries in the region and then re-exporting either back to India or servicing the local market or exporting to third countries.
Okay.
So the key is investment, and the key is a demonstration effect, and I think it is eminently doable. If we can get these connectivity agreements signed at this SAARC summit on multimodal transport, whether it's railways and roads, because those are the 2 key features, I think enormous opportunities open up. So my sense is that we are on the cusp of a major breakthrough. And I think it's really up to the leadership of the heads of government who are meeting just around the corner, so to speak, that we can get this breakthrough and that we can at long last achieve, if you like, the potential which clearly exists. And I'll conclude by saying that Mr. Soni said 6%, it's closer to 5%, the intra-regional trade. But all the documents and research that has been done on this area indicates that within 2 years we can take intra-regional trade from 5% to 25%. And it can really pull South Asia, which is mired in poverty, out of it.
You spoke of the way forward being through energy cooperation. Let's assume that there is indeed a pipeline coming from Afghanistan through Pakistan to India, and tomorrow there is some sort of a confrontation between India and Pakistan. And the Pakistani army decides to blow up this gas pipeline. And by then, India's dependence on this gas pipeline is a certain percentage of its total energy requirement. Then you'll have parts of India going completely dark. Now, how do you convince people back home? How do politicians convince people back home that this is a risk worth taking, given the fact that there are terror attacks still emanating from Pakistani soil, which India needs to deal with?
Well, again, 3 quick points, because I was given part of a very detailed presentation on the Tapi pipeline by the Asian Development Bank recently. And they have said very clearly that there's no problem in terms of financing. There's indeed no problem in terms of guaranteeing the security of the pipeline. The problem really that exists at the moment are 2 problems. One is the pricing issue, and indeed, as we were told earlier today by the President of Afghanistan, that problem has now been solved. So now we need to put in place an intra-governmental mechanism which will manage and operate the pipeline. And you know, the fact of the matter is that it will be a classic case of cutting your nose to spite someone else. The idea of the Pakistan army blowing it up, I mean, Pakistan itself will be a major loser. The other interesting thing is, yes, there could be terrorist attacks on it. But what we were told is that it now takes, because there have been, you know, there are other pipelines within Pakistan itself. It takes, there have been terrorist attacks on that pipeline. It takes them 24 hours to repair the damage to the pipeline. They say Pakistan now has more expertise than any other country in the world in repairing gas pipelines.
Mr. Ketanji, how does Bhutan view the idea of moving towards a South Asia free trade area? Do you think the focus, as Mr. Chaudhary says, should be on sub-regional economic cooperation? Or is it possible, you believe, given these political differences, to still push for a SAARC?
Thank you so much. First of all, go back 25 years ago when I first attended the first SAARC Chamber of Commerce meeting. And till then I heard stories about how the relationship between Pakistan and India. And the first meeting that I attended was actually a surprise to me, because amongst the 7 members that were there, the closest were the Pakistani and the Indian delegates. And outside the meeting hall, they got along brilliantly, speaking the same language, dinner time, singing songs. But the moment it came to the meeting hall, if India said yes, Pakistan said no. If India said no, Pakistan said yes. So I was really confused about this whole situation. But then again, like I said, when you look at the EU history, within a short span of maybe around 11 years after the war, 6 countries, and from them 2 of them that had been involved on the other side, Italy and Germany, came together. What was the main reason they came together? It wasn't social issues, it wasn't women issues, it wasn't child issues, it was economics. If you look at the SAARC, the foundation of SAARC, you know, the first SAARC summit did not speak about economics as the agenda. The second one didn't speak about it. The third one didn't speak about it. I think it was the 7th SAARC summit where they eventually decided that economics was important for the SAARC region. So unless and until economics becomes a critical and a crucial factor for SAARC, I don't think SAARC is going to go forward. I think right now everyone is content within oneself. Even the business community, you have a very small percentage doing the intra-regional trade. There is no real need felt by the common people to force their governments to really seriously take up the challenge of realization of a South Union. For Bhutan, we have the most fantastic free trade agreement with India. We are bordered by India in the south, east and west. So for us, SAARC is not really important. We want to trade our goods. If we want to send it to Pakistan, if we want to send it to Maldives, if we want to send it to Sri Lanka, for business people it's not viable because the prices that we fetch in India is much better than when we send it. So just for the sake of bilateral agreements or multilateral agreements, there is no necessity for us to send our products from Bhutan to Sri Lanka or to Pakistan. But in the interest of being a union, I suppose it is necessary. And we need to start with small steps. And I think the first step, I think personally to go with, is actually looking at the sub-region. Bhutan, Bangladesh, Nepal, India, we have borders. We share borders. Transportation, movement of people, these are real issues. Non-tariff barriers, these are real issues. My issue for non-tariff barriers and transportation is not with Sri Lanka and Maldives, which has an ocean between the two of us. It's not with Pakistan, which has India between us. My issue is right now on ground. So I think just like how the EU started with 6 countries, then slowly progressed to 9, and then 12 to 15 to 20, to what it is today. So I think we need to look at a progressive way of seeing how we can ultimately realize a SAARC Union. Thank you.
Can I just add to that? Because Rahul, your question was, what is the case for sub-regional cooperation? And yes, the essence of sub-regional cooperation is geographical contiguity. So clearly, as Dasho Dorji pointed out, if we are going to engage in a hydroelectric project, it has to involve the countries that are geographically contiguous. So let's look upon sub-regional initiatives as a building block towards achieving a South Asian Economic Union. There are issues which will cover all the 8 member states, starting with connectivity and the removal of the tariff and non-tariff barriers. But there will be, if we get down to projects, then it has to be through sub-regional initiatives.
Now, Mr. Sani, you spoke about just opening up the borders, allowing people in. Now, the Indian government tried this when for cricket matches, fans from Pakistan were allowed in. 3 of them never went back, 2 were reportedly involved in terror attacks subsequently. Now, when this happens, that you trust and that trust ends up backfiring, then while a businessman like yourself, like Mr. Malik, would urge the governments to move towards greater people-to-people contact, there is a big question mark about whether it is safe to give all these visas.
For what we are recommending here is where we are talking is trade and economics. What I'm saying is not difficult to find say 1,000 or 2,000 bona fide businessmen recommended by the various, vetted by respective chambers of commerce which we are talking. And for example, the credible journalist, the credible sportsman. So I think 1 or 2 incidents should not held it as a hostage. We can have a scheme as the SAARC visa exemption sticker scheme is being worked out very properly. And also to say about India and Pakistan particularly, despite the very low ebb of quasi-political relations, I must say that India still hosted 2 months back the Lifestyle Pakistan show in Pragati Maidan, Delhi. So still at least
there were many threats. To which there were many threats and
despite whatever threats, whatever. But what I mean to say that at least India has been trying to engage on the economic side, and we also as SAARC chamber, other chambers, we have been trying that we also, the Pakistan also hosted India show, 2 India shows in Lahore, which was of thumping success. We have queues and queues of the people, our Pakistani brothers and sisters. We hosted 2 Lifestyle Pakistan. So what I'm saying, that trade and economics to integrate this region should not be held hostage by the bilateral quasi-political problem.
I have one question for you before we throw this open to the audience. The big difference between the European Union and whatever happens in the SAARC region is that India dominates SAARC like no country dominates Europe. 80% of the SAARC GDP is Indian. when you travel in Pakistan, amongst the hardliners, there's a fear that Indian business, if there is truly free trade between India and Pakistan, and if Indian companies come and invest in Pakistan, then Indian business will inundate and kill Pakistani enterprise. Do you think that's a real fear? How do you try and get the naysayers on board?
Okay. Actually, what I'm going to say now is not I'm getting into any blame game. Am I allowed to have an exhibition in Bombay? No. There are threats. There are extremists on both sides. Not in Pakistan alone. Last time we had an exhibition in Bombay and we had a lot of threats there to close down. And then Mr. Sani intervened and he's sitting next to me, what I'm saying.
But we made it happen.
We made it happen.
We made it happen for all the 6 days, despite whatever.
Exactly.
We made it a point that we stood with our Pakistani brothers shoulder to shoulder, and I was physically there for those 5 days.
And this is exactly what I'm going to say. The business community is going to make it happen. There are, European Union was born after 2 world wars. Did they stop? The world wars stop them from getting into a union? No. There was a resolve, there was a will, and there were common interests. And so do we have common interests. You touched on a very sensitive issue. I didn't want to make a comment on it. Movement of people. Yes, 3 people, okay, they didn't go back, but prior to that, there was this SARC visa exemption sticker. The whole purpose of this sticker was defeated. The minute I landed in Delhi, they said, you please name the 3 cities you want to visit. That was not the idea behind issuing these stickers. Gradually, we again fought at the SARC jointly. Sani Saab, myself and other friends, and we got it removed. And so there have been problems on both sides. Trust deficit is the main thing. Yes, pipeline, okay, it might be blown up. But let me tell you, Pakistan Army, it's a very wrong concept. Definitely armies have their own interest in both the countries. What is stopping from the pull-up from Siachen? Your critical government was willing to withdraw it from there, but somebody intervened. But these are the areas we should not get into. Let's look at the common areas where we can move. We have moved, I told you, from a major figure of $386 million, we have reached about, and the potential and the indirect trade. We are having a 1,500 miles border with you. Okay, you want to have sub-regional group, that's also not a bad idea. But then you tried that. What happened to BIMSTEC? It's minor, Pakistan, all the SAARC countries are there. Has the economic integration taken place? Did we intervene to stop you from the BIMSTEC? No, we didn't. No, we have to carry. Did European Union leave Greece out because their economy has failed number of times? You have to compromise. We have hardliners on both sides of the divide, and we have to fight them out. We have to fight them out jointly because they are a threat to, at least we are facing it. We are suffering for the last so many years because of the war on terror, and the spillover, I agree with you.
Let's take some questions from the audience. Who would like to ask the first question? Yes, the gentleman over there.
Reality. That's a ground reality. It's because, again, it's nice to talk about all the niceties and European, issues. But the fact of life is that there are problems far more serious than what we believe. Because you cannot change that currency is because of not issue between India and Nepal. It's because of issues between India and Pakistan. I was listening to Mr. Puri today, over lunch, that between India and Pakistan, there is no free flow of newspapers, media. In today's world of internet, from Dubai, India today has to go to Pakistan or something else. The movies, you talk of anything. So My colleague, Mr. Malik, may have the patience to wait for another 30 years, I don't. Okay? So I would certainly recommend and I would certainly advocate for parts of members of the SARC to work together wherever their interests meet. You call it whatever it is. With the blessings of the SARC. Because SARC has not failed on all accounts. SARC has done brilliantly well when it comes to the cultural exchange, the social engagement. There are lots of areas. We wouldn't be sitting here if there was no SARC instrument. The leaders, it presents a beautiful platform for the leaders to meet if they want to talk sense and talk business. But today what is hindering is they must agree on all the issues together. And that doesn't happen. So I think the moment they agree that let this present a platform which will open the avenues to start real partnerships, okay? Let the focus shift from, from just shaking hands of General Musharraf to Vajpayee, and today also there is a, back in the heads of everyone here and in India and in Pakistan, whether Nawaz Sharif will meet with Mr. Modi or not. These are the issues which is clouding the whole SARC processes. I think the focus has to shift that every time they meet, they make one or two breakthrough. Like my friend Farooq mentioned, maybe in the field of connectivity of roads. Let India provide us with unrestricted, unhindered access to Bangladesh, to Wagah, to Pakistan, to Wagah. Let their differences be kept aside if they have that problem. Let the energy travel freely. If I have surplus energy in Nepal, let me export that to Bangladesh or bring gas from Bangladesh and generate cheap electricity here. We can't agree on these basic issues. So I think a meeting like this needs to urge, I don't know whether any of those who are the real decision makers are watching this program, but I would certainly urge them to go back in the history and look once again.
And I found out later in New York that from the Prime Minister downwards, virtually the entire establishment had watched the India Today Global Roundtable in New York. So I hope they're doing the same here. Maybe not live, but later. Let's take the next question. Yes, the gentleman there.
To visit 6 countries, to explore whether we could introduce something similar to the APEC business.
That's what he's asking.
And I did visit India and I met Mr. Salman Khurshid, and I did visit Pakistan and I met the advisor for foreign affairs, Dr. Sartaj Aziz. And there was strong support for this. The process is very simple. In issuing the APEC business card, they carry out a security verification of the individual who applies for it. Once the security agencies clear it, he gets the card and it's valid for a 3 to 5 year period. And then you don't need a visa, you just have your APEC business card, which is like a visa. And there's no reason why we can't do that with the SARC sticker. I mean, I think when I look back on my life, probably the only sensible initiative I have taken was to get the SARC summit to agree that former foreign secretaries and their wives should get a SARC sticker for the rest of their life. I got it through by simply telling my Pakistan and Indian colleagues that one day, very soon, both of you are going to retire, and do you want to go through the hassle of ringing up X, Y, and Z to get a visa, and you have no idea how.
Sir, he's lucky to have this one, so we get visa. He's lucky to have the SARC visa for rest of life. For businessmen, the SARC visa exemption sticker, which was for 1 year, has been reduced now to 3 months. And we were just talking about gender equality. Earlier spouses used to get, they have been removed. So already, from 1 year, we are moving backwards to 3 months. So each businessman have to go for renewal of this.
So we hope it will be brought back. You have to push
1 or 2
government.
years.
At one level, your government is saying they welcome more visas. But At an operational level, they are making it more difficult. It makes no sense.
So either you push your government or you become foreign secretary. Yes. That's really
And about the trade connectivity, what the gentleman said, it is, India have set up integrated checkposts. Now we opened at Wagah, which is working out very well for Pakistan, Nepal. So I think the need is the multimodal transport, the multi-shipping, the shipping agreement would definitely pave way, as I gave the example earlier in my remarks, from Bangladesh to Nepal or for all these landlocked countries. But together with this, we want a SAARC investment and trade protection agreement like Tapi gas pipeline and other, which is multilateral and which can encourage the joint ventures in hydro, health sector, IT sector. So I think, and the financial institution, of course, the setting up of South Asian Development Bank and reciprocal bank branches in each other countries is very fundamental if the economic integration has to take place.
If you could build on the question about whether there's a fear or a concern amongst the smaller SAARC nations that if you were to open up the SAARC region for trade, and if Indian business comes and invests in your countries, is there a fear that Indian business will hurt local business interests?
Small countries need big markets. The whole world is vying for India as a market. Today in Bhutan, if I were restricted to doing trade and business within Bhutan, I have to sell products to a population of 700,000 people. But the very fact that now we have free trade with India opens up my market to 1.2 billion people. So on one hand, we can't say that we want a market of 1.2 billion, but we're not willing to open up our 700,000 market to the Indian businessmen. So I think it has to be reciprocal. And I think it is in the interest of small countries actually to want to do free trade with India. Because at the end of the day, even if they come to your country, you have their permission to do business with their country.
We'll take one more question, that will be the last. That lady over there. Feel the frustration in this room.
I'll tell you, when Mr. Nawaz Sharif took as the Prime Minister, I think about 15-20 days after his oath, we took a chartered flight and few of us went for an economic engagement. Mr. Malik was there. I personally, earlier also he was there. So first of all, as far as the Prime Minister of Pakistan and the Federation of Pakistan Chamber of Commerce, and as Binoji was talking, people to people contact, is so thick. And we didn't doubt the integrity of Nawaz Sharif because he was very pro. Even he discussed in our presence with the businessman the terminology of most favored nation. Then he said we will have a problem. Then we coined with this non-discriminatory, market access. He asked the Pakistani counterpart, the Commerce Secretary, the Commerce Minister, the present Commerce Minister, who later came to India. So what I mean to say that we feel a sense of, positivity is there, but sometimes we feel maybe he's not able to push this non-discriminatory market access and the other problems because
why
sometimes
is he able to push it, Mr. Malik?
Yes.
He's a businessman, he understands business, he understands free trade.
That this MFN is a misnomer. See,
now you change the name.
No, please, bear with me for a minute. You have given MFN to Pakistan, but why strength lies that you have put in the negative list? I didn't want to raise this issue here, but look at your negative list. It's about 800 items there. Pakistan has a negative list of 1100 items. Look at the size of your economy, look at the size of my economy. And the textile is the backbone of Pakistan, exports. You have put it in the negative list and put it on high. What good is that MFN to me? See, this is what I am saying. We should still not lose hope in SAARC. Now SAARC, I am talking as a region. SAARC has signed 42 agreements. Give me progress on each of them. It's lagging at the implementation stage, and this is the issue I raised yesterday again. What we need in SAARC is an implementation monitoring committee to see these 42 agreements which have been signed, what has been the progress on these items.
What makes you think the committee will change anything? We had lots of committees under Manmohan Singh.
No, this committee should be headed by the Prime Ministers themselves.
And include private sector of all the SAARC countries. It's the private sector which is the engine of growth, and in private sector life, the stability of this whole region?
I think the consensus here is that the quasi-political issues, the bilateral issues should not hold the trade and economic integration to a hostage.
No, but we've been able to forge this consensus in a panel mostly of businessmen. If a consensus of
I
this
think
nature
you have
can be
the
forged amongst
youth is
politicians,
the people are.
Nobody will oppose it, even politicians, the other stakeholders will never oppose. Everybody is saying, okay, let the bilateral, other quasi-political issues, but let the trade move on, economic integration move on, for the benefit of poor people, let the hydro potential be tapped, let the joint ventures come in health sector, so on and so forth.
Actually, I add to what Mr. Sani is saying. These political people, who brings them to power? It's our vote and it's our finances. I raised this issue in India. I said, we have a strong leverage. Stop financing them. If they are causing hindrance in the development of this region, the corporate sector should not finance.
but it doesn't change even if the government change.
It will change.
I'm saying whether it's the
change
PPP
has
or
to
the
come.
PMNL, whether it's the Congress or the BJP, doesn't change.
No, the thing will
So who do you finance then?
Who? No, nobody. If they are not following the agenda of the FARC, the agenda of the people of this region, we shouldn't finance anyone of them.
Because people of SAARC, the trade and business community of SAARC wants peace and prosperity. That is the bottom line.
That's a good
governments have to
note
help.
to end this session on as well. Strong consensus amongst the people present over here and consensus also amongst the businessmen. You say that the politicians always support you and the idea of moving towards greater economic cooperation. If only they would walk the talk, then we'd find ways of increasing trade instead of just achieving the basics. Thank you all so much, all of you, for joining us. Very, very interesting thoughts. And I think this has been a very thought-provoking conclave and a very thought-provoking session. Thank you. Thank you so much.
So, this upcoming SAARC summit, so what are your expectations from this summit? Like PM Modi has been elected now in India and he is second time in Nepal, and also all the presidents and prime ministers from all the other countries are here. So what are your expectations from this summit?
Well, certainly it's a very, very happy occasion for all the leaders to meet. Prime Minister Modi ji has come today, and also he has already addressed and spoken about the warm relationship between India and Nepal. One will wait for what the leaders speak over the next 2 days, and certainly one is hopeful that the leadership of the entire region will work towards seeing how we can develop SAARC and make it into a success model.
And so we were talking about the South Asia free trade area. So what do you think? Is that possible? And if this is
Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. Just because we haven't had a very satisfactory past in achieving this objective, it does not mean that we may not be able to achieve it in the future. There are issues involved in achieving it fully, but I'm sure because it's being discussed and in the media and other places, certainly I'm sure the countries and the leaders will try to make this a reality sooner than later.
And so we were also talking about the reservation of women in the parliament of Nepal, India, Pakistan, about the 33%. So don't you think that these selections should be more deserved than reserved?
Women, in terms of representation in decision making, is something that is an aspired goal. Because after all, women do constitute 50% of our population. But they are not there in the commensurate numbers when it comes to decision making or in important positions or in formal positions of authority and responsibility. So reservation could be affirmative action as it is considered, could be one step to help provide an opportunity for them to be able to come into that. However, at the end of the day, the ideal situation is when it happens naturally, but till that happens, any help that removes the imbalance would be a good objective to look at.
And one last question, is a threat of terrorism, there is a threat of infiltration, but what about the general public, for the cultural interest, for the economic interest, for the business interest?
Well, there have been times when some movement has taken place on that. As you yourself pointed out, there are issues related to security, terrorism, other sensitive issues that affect multiple countries in this region. So from that perspective, certainly these have to be ironed out, but there has been often talk about it. Let us see what the leadership talks over the next few days.